am finally updating my daily face sunscreen recommendation list.
Here we go again.
It's Michelle of Lab Muffin Beauty Science, Chemistry PhD, Cosmetic Chemist, and Sunscreen Connoisseur. I know it's been a while since my last video, but the sunscreens that I'm adding this time aren't like a massive step over the ones I recommended last time. But I do like giving more options in case you can't get them where you live, or you're allergic to a particular ingredient, or they get discontinued. That is the bane of my existence. A few sunscreens that were on my list were discontinued before I got around to filming this. Important background info, these are daily face sunscreens. Most of these are not going to hold up to eating really spicy laksa, doing burpees in the park, rapping really angrily. It's also best to layer your protection. More slices means a smaller chance of holes lining up. Sunscreen is one of the more error-prone forms of sun protection, so relying just on sunscreen probably isn't the best idea. This diagram is from my book, The Science of Beauty. This list is subjective. It is my opinion. My skin is not your skin. My likes are not your likes. Everyone is unique. Your best bet is probably to go with recommendations from people with similar skin to you. My skin is oily to normal, it's prone to clogged pores, especially with sunscreens. It is also pretty easily dehydrated and I get hyperpigmentation pretty easily. Genetics plays a big part in this. This is what my dad's pigment looks like. Dad, if you're watching, I'm sorry I keep showing this photo of you, but people need to understand the level of pigment that nature has intended for me. In general, these are my likes for sunscreens. I like lightweight. My skin is oily, I live in a place that is generally hot and humid, and I walk really fast so I get sweaty. I also like my sunscreens to be nice under makeup, so no pilling or bunching and not too much movement over time. I usually use a translucent powder over my makeup. This one is from Jolique, and that sort of soaks up the oil and shine a bit, so shine and stickiness is not automatically a deal breaker for me. I also do not like eye sting, but eye sting is pretty personal, so what does and doesn't cause eye sting for me is not necessarily the case for you. This year I'm putting mineral and hybrid sunscreens for a later separate video. For me, they just haven't really been on the same level as these organic/chemical sunscreens, but I have tried some recently that are getting closer. The gap is narrowing. Plus, I didn't have time to film that many trials. My face hurts from trying all the ones in this video already. This video also doesn't have sticks and sprays. They are really more like secondary sunscreens. It is hard to get enough of those on your face. And a disclaimer, the vast majority of my audience are not in Australia. Most of the sunscreens I'm going to talk about are not approved for sale in Australia. There's going to be a separate section for Australian sunscreens. I'll have more disclaimers when I get there. A lot of these products were free PR samples or they were from a sponsorship, but only about 5% of the sunscreens that I've been given or even tried made it onto this list, so there is a strict selection process here. Let me know if you tried these sunscreens in the comments, what you thought. Also, give me suggestions for your favorite sunscreens that I need to try. Let's start with new entries to the recommended list. The Nivea UV Deep Protect and Care Essence. My husband brought this back from Japan. It has a gel texture. It's got a really light and floral, fresh sort of fragrance. It has a light cooling sort of sensation as you apply it. There is alcohol high on the ingredient list, but I couldn't really smell much of the alcohol when I was applying it and I didn't feel any burning on my skin. This time I've decided to show myself putting on each of the sunscreens. I've weighed out 0.8 grams for these, which is the amount I need for my face size and like one finger. This spreads really nicely, it dries down quickly, but the flip side of that is that it does get a little bit tacky and hard to spread a bit faster if you go back and try to apply more on areas you've already covered. After it's dried down, it's clear and a little bit glossy, but it is a really thin, comfortable layer. There's not like a greasy shine, and that shine is easily covered up by a tiny amount of powder. There is a bit of a pore filling effect, and it feels really lightweight even though it is water resistant. Standardized water resistance labeling has been coming in for Japanese and Korean sunscreens, and the standard is the same as for Europe. The SPF is allowed to drop by up to half after the immersion time, so in theory, the SPF could be as low as 25 after 80 minutes. The packaging does say that this is recommended for sports, the pool and the beach. I assume it is for Japanese levels of sun. This is very, very similar to the next sunscreen, which is the Bioré Aqua Rich Watery Essence. This is the 2023 version. It is another Japanese sunscreen. My best friend brought it back to me when she went to Japan. Both of these have the same parent company, Cal. They have the same ratings for everything, and they have very similar filters. And just like every other version of this that I've reviewed for the last decade, which is like I think 4 of them now, It is fantastic, it is very affordable and very wearable. It is an excellent introduction to Asian sunscreens. It has a gel cream texture and again it has a light cooling sensation when you're applying it. It also has a really light fragrance, maybe like a sort of baby powder fragrance, and when it's dried it has that lovely pore filling effect. Both of these seem to have very similar film forming technologies, so I guess more importantly, what are the differences? I found that the Bioré has slightly more of an alcohol smell when I was applying it, but it didn't really bother me and the alcohol itself didn't really irritate my skin or anything. The Bioré is a bit oilier, it doesn't dry down quite as quickly as the Nivea. The Nivea is more matte, my skin is oily, so I personally prefer the Nivea. If I try extremely hard and massage my face a whole bunch after the sunscreens have dried down, I can get the Bioré to pill a little bit. The Nivea doesn't. I have never had an issue with either one of these pilling under makeup, so this is probably only an issue if everything pills on you. The Bioré comes in a larger pack size, it's 70 grams versus 50, and it has a flip top lid. Next we have the Eucerin Oil Control Dry Touch Gel Cream. This is the European version. This was one of the sunscreens I bought when I was in Italy a while back. It was the one that I used the most while I was on holiday. I really like this because it isn't too glidey when I'm applying it. It is fragrance free with very minimal smell. There is alcohol in it, but to me, it isn't really that obvious. The finish is satiny. It isn't as matte as I really expected for an oil control product, but honestly, I don't think any chemical sunscreens go really super matte. But it does stay the same level of satiny for a really long time, so I found that really impressive in summer. It is heavier than Asian sunscreens, which is not really that surprising. It's a European sunscreen, but it is still really lightweight compared to most other European sunscreens. I found it really comfortable, especially given that this is water resistant. I really enjoyed wearing this. It felt like it stayed in place really well despite all the oil and sweat and heat. Another European sunscreen, the Garnier Anti-Dark Spots and Anti-Pollution Super UV. I bought this at Boots in Heathrow Airport and it is really similar to the old Roche-Posay Invisible Fluid. I talked about that in my last recommendations video. It is still available in some places, but not the UK. This has an almost identical ingredient list. It is definitely meant to be a dupe, but they are manufactured in different countries. This is manufactured in Germany, so I would guess that they probably use some different ingredient suppliers, so they are not going to be completely identical. But if you missed the old Invisible Fluid, this is probably the next closest thing. It's fragrance-free, it's lightweight, it's non-greasy, it is just really lovely and smooth to apply. It says it's anti-eye stinging, which was true in my experience. I found this a bit more matte and less oily than I expected, which was a really pleasant surprise. The downsides, which honestly aren't really much of a downside, there's a slight sunscreen smell and it is pretty runny. It is a fluid. But it's not ridiculous, it is still pretty manageable and doesn't make a massive mess. Also, the packaging is pretty neat. It is Omar approved. My husband Omar hates sunscreens that can explode in his bag. It's a very specific want. But the nozzle is really impressive compared to a whole bunch of sunscreens that are similar with similar nozzles. This nozzle just doesn't seem to be very messy. Like, there is no sunscreen on the threads. Next we have the Roche-Posay UVMune 400 sunscreens. So many of you have asked me what I think of the UVMune 400 range from Roche-Posay. This has been really hyped up because it contains a brand new UV filter that is exclusive to L'Oreal. It was developed with BASF. The full name is a mouthful. It is methoxypropylaminocyclohexanilidine ethoxyethylcyanoacetate. Let's not try that again. It's MCE or Mexoral 400. I've mentioned before that I don't think this is as much of a massive game changer, must-have, that some people have been making it out to be. Some people have asked me to elaborate on this, so here is like the extended version. I think it is super cool to have a new filter and I am really impressed by the innovation behind it. It is really good at absorbing UV for the percentage included in a sunscreen. It is even higher than avobenzone, which I have said before is pretty hectic. Here are some other UV filters. This would be roughly how MCE looks. You can see that it covers longer UVA wavelengths from 370 to 400 nanometers, and other filters don't really cover that area that well. I am also really impressed by how the absorption sort of plummets close to the visible region that is about 400 nanometers. That means that you get minimal visibility on skin. The sunscreens with it do seem to be a little bit on the yellow side, so it does seem to absorb a bit of violet light. But this probably isn't a big problem unless your skin is very pale and cool toned. I'm also pretty impressed by the clinical trials on it. It seems like they are actually really trying to challenge it and put it through its paces. I was especially impressed by this one, which was published recently. They compared SPF 50 sunscreen with and without MCE. The people had 2 hours of sun exposure for 8 weeks on the face and arms, and the absorption spectra of the two sunscreens look like this. The fact that they measured any difference when the two absorbance spectra aren't wildly different was really impressive to me. But the differences weren't like really massive. It seems to be mostly differences in pigmented spots in more pigment-prone skin types. All of the studies I've come across use people with phototypes 3 and 4 skin. That's like darker, more pigment-prone skin, Asian and darker, except for the newest one which had some people with phototype 2. So it is clearly an impressive technological improvement, but in terms of practical implications for people, I don't think it will be that big for most people. There is already some UVA1 coverage with products on the market, so avobenzone does creep into that range. Not shown here is the iron oxides, which are in tinted products. And of course, there's also shade and hats and sunglasses, as well as window tints. We do have info on how shorter wavelength UVA and blue-violet light both impact skin, so it seems like the people who would benefit the most from filling in that longer UVA1 gap, people who have very pigment-prone skin, they are probably layering a lot of these things already, plus they are probably using pigment fading products, and they are very likely not getting 2 hours of direct sun a day. So I would expect that in real life, the difference might not be as noticeable as in the study. But I do think the UVMune products do fill a few important niches. The biggest benefit, I think, is for people who might not be using the other options. So, for example, people who work outdoors or people who don't want to wear makeup or broad-brimmed hats. There are also some places on your face where some of these things don't really work. So things like hats and sunglasses, they don't protect the lower part of your face very well. And of course, if you are using these things and you're not seeing your pigment fade as much as you want, then you are going to get even higher protection with this layered with everything else. But whether these sunscreens are a must-have to get, I think it is very subjective, especially because they are pretty pricey to get if you are outside of Europe. On top of that, there are some cosmetic downsides that people have noticed, so things like the texture, the scent. There does seem to be more alcohol in these products compared to previous formulas. My full reviews of the range are on my blog, but out of the ones that I've tried, my recommendation for oily skin is the Oil Control Gel Cream. My friend Hannah English grabbed a sample of this for me from a Roche-Posay event that she went to in Singapore. This does contain mattifying microparticles that help to absorb excess oil, and those were in the other oil control products from LRP as well, which I have also really enjoyed. There are a few tinted versions. In general, I have found that European tinted sunscreens, firstly, only come in 1 or 2 different colors, and they are usually more pink toned than my skin is okay with. And they're also a bit too pigmented to really get away with unless your skin is a really good color match. More difficult to get European sunscreens, the Evy Technology Mousses. These were sent to me by Evy, who are a Swedish brand. It was a massive pain because of the aerosol format. The SPF 30 version of the face mousse was in my honorable mentions last time, but it has moved up because first off, it is SPF 50. Secondly, even though they are a bit heavier and stickier for my skin and climate than I generally like for everyday wear, although it isn't really noticeable under makeup, I did start doing very sweaty exercise outside in the sun. I know, who even am I? It turns out that the mousse format is fantastic for reapplying quickly and easily. It's like it's already spread out a whole bunch, so you can just slap it on really quickly. You don't need to rub it in much, and it is really good if you are unco. You're not like flinging sunscreen fluid everywhere and getting lotion all over your stuff. It is also really easy to apply lots of these sunscreens in one go. You don't have to like apply it in 2 layers and wait in between. Evy recommend applying a golf ball sized amount to your face, and I found that that is pretty accurate by weight. The downside, if it's windy, then it can fly away if you're not careful. That happened to me the first time at the beach and I was not prepared. Evy also do a lot of extra testing on their sunscreen products, which I find really impressive. I have a video on some of that, plus they also did a sponsored talk at the Sunscreen E-Summit that I co-hosted in 2023. The face version isn't water resistant, but the body ones are. I've been using the kids one. I don't really know why. The biggest difference is that the water resistant ones are a lot stickier than the face ones, but honestly, I haven't really noticed a huge difference when it's on my skin and I'm not touching it. Onto some sunscreens that I've reviewed before. I will run through these really quickly, so you can look at my older videos on these for more details. First, we have the Round Lab Birch Juice Moisturizing Sunscreen, which I reviewed for a sponsored Style Cream video. There's a sort of family of Korean sunscreens which have the same core formula, they have the same filters, and they are all made by Kolmar. They are a big Korean sunscreen manufacturer, but all of these have like very slightly different finishes and bonus ingredients. Round Lab is the version that's super popular in Korea. It's covered in Korean writing, so it is like kind of like the hipster version. It's very similar to the Beauty of Joseon sunscreen, which has been my longtime favorite. I wore that one at my wedding and I gave out little tubes as wedding favors. They feel almost the same on my skin. I would say that this is like a touch more moisturizing. It's glidey and moisturizing without being like sticky or greasy. Now, in terms of white cast, if I apply this unevenly and let it dry, then sometimes I will get a bit of a white streak, but it blends out really easily. On some people with darker skin, there is a slight white cast though that doesn't go away. So for example, my friend Esther, who is the melanin chemist on Instagram, her skin tone is NW45. There's no alcohol in the sunscreens from this family, and most of these also don't have fragrance. The Skim 104 Hyalu-Cica Water Fit Sun Serum is another one from this same family, but this is probably the lightest version there is. It's really popular with people in more humid countries. I reviewed this for a Skim 104 sponsored video. This dries down to feel like almost nothing, but it is still hydrating. It is really great if you hate the feel of sunscreen on your face. I also really like this flat pump tube. It is really good for tucking into your handbag, and it's really easy to measure out the right amount of product. I'm also adding the Haruharu Wonder Black Rice Moisture Airyfit Daily Sunscreen. This is one of the very few Korean chemical sunscreens that has a different formula from all those Kolmar ones that I've tried so far that I would still give top marks to for my skin. I reviewed this for a Haruharu sponsored video, and the biggest upside is that it has no white cast if you have darker skin. I would say that this is slightly more moisturizing than the Round Lab. Alright, Australian sunscreens. Honestly, one of the main reasons I have taken so long to do a new recommendations video is the regulations surrounding how influencers / content creators, if you like to use the fancy name, are allowed to talk about sunscreens that are available in Australia. The regulations allow me to recommend sunscreens sold in Australia, but I can't talk about my personal experience with them if I've been sent a free sample, or potentially if I've ever worked with the brand on sunscreen or they've given me any other free samples, or potentially if I want to work with the brand in the future. The regulations are not very clear on this. These regulations are meant to be for any therapeutic products, which are essentially drugs in Australia, and it makes sense to an extent. You don't want influencers to get paid by brands to say their brand of antibiotic worked better for them than this other brand, or this SPF 50 sunscreen protected me better from burning than this other SPF 50 sunscreen. Anecdotes are really persuasive, so you wouldn't want brands to use an influencer's experience to try to sway people over standardized, regulated tests. But for sunscreens, there is so much evidence showing that the main reasons that people don't use sunscreens, it isn't effectiveness or any of the other regulated aspects. It is cosmetic aspects, like a lot of sunscreens are heavy and greasy, they sting your eyes, they clog your pores, they make you look white and shiny and oily. And influencers talking about their personal experience with sunscreens online, I think that's gone a really long way towards making people realize that a lot of sunscreens are not like this, and just kind of making sunscreens cool again. And just giving sunscreens the same sort of attention as, let's say, tanning oils, which aren't regulated the same way, so influencers can still go wild talking about how much they love those. Some influencers are turning down sunscreen samples and buying them themselves to review to get the info out there, which I think is fantastic. But I've been around for a really long time. I have pretty big numbers, so most brands have sent me free samples at some point, and I have worked with a whole bunch in a paid capacity. Most of my audience isn't Australian, so really it would probably make sense for me to just never talk about Australian sunscreens. But I want to, because I think we do have some of the best sunscreens and sunscreen regulations in the world. I think it makes sense for Australians to use sunscreens regulated according to Australian standards. If Australian content creators like me with big platforms didn't talk about them, then Australians would be mostly hearing about overseas sunscreens from overseas influencers. And that's already happening to some extent. I've had someone in Australia ask me how to import Supergoop from the US because that is the sunscreen that they have heard the most good things about. That just should not be happening. So I'm going to be showing you what the sunscreen looks like and talking about it in general terms. I will refer to the product descriptions and what other people are saying about them. That's what I did in my old recommendations video, and I think I managed to do it without sounding too weird. But that one took a really long time to write, so I thought I would just explain it up front this time. I'm also bringing on Omar, my husband, to talk about his experience with them. First, we have the Cancer Council Active Sunscreen. They are a cancer charity here. They do a lot of good work with sun safety awareness. They have physical stores where you can buy sun protective clothing and of course their sunscreens. They have a whole bunch of sunscreens. I had 2 in my honorable mentions last time. One of the issues that a lot of people complain about with some of their sunscreens is eye sting, and this one gets recommended a lot on skincare forums instead. I didn't buy and try this until late last year and it is now on my recommended list. It is 4 hours water resistant and it also comes in a big 200ml pump, so twice the size, for under $20. And now we can have my husband Omar's reviews.
Alright, smells neutral, even slightly pleasant plastic. Feels exceptionally light, a big achievement for an Australian sunscreen with water resistance. It's smooth and glides well, no piling up, and it doesn't feel like it's going to rub off either. No shine or whiteness, no stinging, which is the eye stinging, or irritation. Lightly oily feel, but doesn't feel enough to clog pores. Packaging is a flip top with a squeezable container, which means that it could explode in your bag.
What do you mean by pleasantly plastic?
It smells like plastic.
But you like it.
But it's okay. You know when electronics burn and you get a plastic smell that comes out of it? That's unpleasant. This is pleasant.
Hamilton Everyday Face. This is another sunscreen I bought after seeing it recommended over and over again in tons of skincare forums. Fun history fact: Hamilton was the lab set up by Milton Blake, who was an Australian chemist. He was one of the inventors of sunscreen back in the 1930s. He called himself H.A. Milton in his notes. I haven't really worked out why, but I do feel an affinity for people with really hard to explain usernames. Hamilton was actually the first sunscreen brand I ever used back when I was like 6 and my dad was teaching me how to swim in the backyard. This was reformulated recently. You can see it says like new formula. The main change is the addition of bimotrizonol, which is a newer UVA filter. Before we get going, can you show the class which sunscreens you approve of?
Yeah, look at this, right? I could probably do it with my little finger. Oh, no.
Okay.
What
about this?
Did you see how little? This is really... Why?
Because not everyone needs to have violence inside their backpacks.
It's so bad, though.
How's this one?
Oh, it's twist. Yes. This is good. This is good. I feel like it's unlikely to explode in either direction. If I was to squeeze it like this, which direction do you think it would explode in?
Don't.
Because it won't go like that. It'll go this way or that way. The container is nice, but it should be a twist. This is good. I like this one. I want to talk about why I like this one, especially out of all the others. It's got a firm case in all directions except for the one direction that you want to squeeze in. It's not going to explode in any other direction. It can only go in this direction. And you have to twist out off the top. Now, if you're going to be using this on a daily basis, twisting it off, it's not that big of a deal. Except for the fact that you can lose the cap.
Get back to work.
All right. Yes, dear. Hamilton. Initially, I was concerned about Hamilton because it comes out of the bottle looking brown, and I'm not a fan of putting on foundation. But wow. Wow. But it doesn't show up at all on my skin. Scent is natural or neutral. The cream is super light and glides on very well. It sinks in great. There's no piling and no tackiness. It's not noticeable at all and not that much shine. The product description says it's matte finish. I'd agree with that. It's not white, so it's not white casting. There's no stinging or irritation, and it is lightly moisturizing as well. Package again is a flip top with a squeezable container, which means that it can still explode in your bag. This should change.
Clear Skincare Hydrating Sunscreen Lotion. This is another recently launched reformulation. This was sent to me as a PR sample. It has a really similar ingredient list to the Hamilton sunscreen.
All right, Clear Skincare. Smells lightly nice, very light, and glides really well. Sinks in great. You have to rub it in a little, but it's not tacky at all. Initially comes out lightly white on my skin, but disappears after 30 seconds and leaves behind a very nice little bit of a shine. It is shinier than Hamilton, but there's no stinging, there's no irritation, and Wow. Super hydrating too. I can actually feel it. No, seriously, I tried on all 5 of these sunscreens, thanks to Michelle, and this one was the most hydrating out of them all. Doesn't feel like it will clog up my pores either. Again, packaging is a flip top with a squeezable container, potential for bag explosions. Where's the twisty tops?
You can check out my old video for my top sunscreens from last time. I feel like they all still hold up, but the Bioré has been replaced by the new version. On to my honourable mentions, the Bondi Sands Hydra sunscreen. The fragrance-free lotion also from Bondi Sands was in my honourable mentions last year. It was an Australian sunscreen that is also available in tons of other countries. It went viral in so many places because, like I said before, Australian sunscreens are great.
Alright, Bondi Sands Hydra. Appears lightly oily on my skin, but disappears very quickly. It smells okay, kind of plastic. Smooth to apply, easy to work with, sinks in quickly and also doesn't pile up. It doesn't leave any white on my face. It feels oily but light with a very light shine. No stinging on the skin, but lightly irritating. I might have had dry skin at the time. Not really sure about the hydrating part of this, but doesn't feel like it's going to clog up my skin. Packaging is a flip top, again, with a squeezable container, potential for bag explosions. It's lighter and less greasy than the other Bondi Sands sunscreen.
The Naked Sundays CabanaClear Water Gel Serum, the only reason this isn't in the top, for me, is because it only has older filters, but the upside is, it is available in the US. It's formulated to be lightweight, hydrating, and it's clear, as you can tell from the name. It has 0 silicone though, unlike a lot of clear sunscreens. There is a photo on the website of someone with very dark skin using it and it doesn't show up. It has a gel cream formula. It has a similar sort of formula build to a lot of overseas sunscreens.
Alright, Naked Sundays. I don't like the smell personally, but others might be okay with it. It feels smooth, light, and glides on well, but it takes a while to sink in. And it still feels oily about 10 minutes later. Doesn't pile up. Has a noticeable shine and stays white for a short while after applying. I think it was white for me for a good minute afterwards. There's no stinging or irritation, but it doesn't feel hydrating at all. Also feels a bit heavy. Hate the packaging. That cap is going to pop off just by looking at it. Also, why is it only 30 ml? Feels like you're going to apply it to your face once and that's it. You throw it away. Don't listen to me. I'm not an expert.
I also wanted to add like a wish list of things that I think are missing from sunscreens. Please let me know what your wish list is. First, I really want more tinted sunscreen options, so just more shades really. I also want more innovations around how sunscreens are used, so things like testing the impact of different application methods, like what happens when you put sunscreen under makeup, what happens with setting sprays if you're applying with brushes or sponges. I'd also like to see innovations around things that make sunscreen easier to use, so things like longer wear and easier reapplication. I also want to see more mineral sunscreens that actually feel nice and look nice. I obviously don't really mind what sort of sunscreen I use, but there are lots of people with allergies who do need these sunscreens. I also wanted to add a note. I think a lot of people tend to get too deep into sunscreen and they end up obsessing a bit over finding the perfect sunscreen and using it perfectly. I think it's helpful to remember that the NAMBA trial, which was the largest clinical trial on sunscreen use, they saw a whole bunch of great effects with daily sunscreen. Squamous cell carcinomas reduced by 40%. The skin of daily sunscreen users had no detectable increase in aging, and they were 24% less likely to show increased signs of aging. And that was with an SPF 16 sunscreen that was in the 90s. Now, 3 decades later, our sunscreens are leaps and bounds better. And I think that just really shows that consistency is much more important than perfection. So find a sunscreen that you can wear every day, that you enjoy wearing, that is within your budget, and you are already doing so much for your skin. So more important than the sunscreen you use is how you use it. I talk about that in this video. If you like nerding out about beauty, check out my book, The Science of Beauty. It has lots of really nice illustrations and useful information, all about beauty with a more sort of technical bent. I also have a massive collection of sunscreen videos for your binging pleasure. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.